Some messages don't just change your plans, they rewrite the entire map of your life while you're standing still, holding your luggage. When my phone buzzed at exactly 6:45 a.m. that rainy Tuesday morning, I was adjusting my tie in the mirror, thinking about the ocean breeze. The text from my wife, Sarah, was brief, cold, and entirely devoid of the woman I thought I had been married to for 12 years. Plans have changed, you're not going on the cruise. My daughter wants her real dad. I stared at the screen, the reflection of my own face looking back at me, suddenly unfamiliar. I am Frank, a 42-year-old high school history teacher, a man who built his entire existence around a quiet life, a dedicated marriage, and a girl I loved as my own daughter, Maya, who had just turned 16. To understand the weight of that message, you have to understand the quiet warmth of our home before the storm hit. For over a decade, my life was defined by routine, care, and a deep, unspoken gratitude. I met Sarah when Maya was just a toddler, a fragile 4-year-old girl with scraped knees and terrified eyes. Her biological father, a man named Marcus, had walked out the moment the financial responsibilities became real, leaving Sarah overwhelmed and drowning in debt. I stepped into those empty shoes willingly, proudly. I didn't just marry Sarah, I adopted the responsibility of being Maya's protector. Every scraped knee, every late-night fever, every parent-teacher meeting, I was there. My salary from the school wasn't grand, but it was steady. Every extra penny I made from tutoring went into a special savings account meant for Maya's future, for her college, for her dreams. Our home smelled of Sunday pancakes and lavender detergent, a peaceful sanctuary where I thought trust was the foundation we slept on. Sarah always praised my stability. She would rest her head on my chest while we watched the evening news and whisper how lucky she was to find a man who didn't run when things got difficult. And Maya called me Dad before she even learned how to spell it. We had spent the last 8 months planning this Caribbean cruise to celebrate Maya's 16th birthday and her excellent report card. It was supposed to be our first major family vacation, a hard-earned reward. I spent months budgeting, cutting back on personal expenses, and even selling my grandfather's vintage watch just to afford the ocean view suite they both wanted. But looking back, the shadows had already begun to stretch across our living room long before that Tuesday morning. A few weeks prior, Sarah started taking her phone into the bathroom, leaving it face down on the kitchen counter whenever I walked into the room. When I asked her about it, she laughed it off, her voice a pitch higher than usual, claiming she was just organizing a surprise presentation for Maya's birthday. I believed her because love makes you blind to the very things that should make you question everything. Then there were the sudden evening errands, the missing cash from our shared emergency drawer, and the way Maya began avoiding my gaze during dinner, staring intently at her plate whenever I asked about her week. The atmosphere in the house shifted from warm safety to a suffocating, silent tension, like the heavy air right before a thunderstorm. I told myself it was just the stress of the upcoming trip, a teenager's moody phase, a wife's exhaustion. I chose to trust, because the alternative was too terrifying to face. The truth exploded in my hands with that 6:45 a.m. text message. Sarah and Maya had left for the port the previous evening to stay at a hotel near the docks, claiming they wanted to avoid the morning traffic. I was supposed to meet them at the ship's boarding gate after finishing a mandatory early morning staff meeting at the school. Instead, I was left standing in our empty bedroom with a packed suitcase at my feet, holding a text message that stripped away my identity as a father and a husband in less than 20 words. They hadn't just changed the plans, they had invited Marcus, the man who hadn't paid a single dollar of child support in 12 years, to take my place in the ocean view suite I bought with my own sweat. The silence that followed the realization of betrayal is a heavy, suffocating thing. For nearly an hour, I didn't move. I just sat on the edge of our neatly made bed, staring at the wall where a framed photo of our last family trip to the lake hung. In it, Maya was laughing, her arms wrapped around my neck, and Sarah was smiling into the camera. It all felt like a cruel illusion now. My heart hammered against my ribs, not with anger initially, but with a profound, crippling confusion. I picked up my phone and called Sarah. It went straight to voicemail. I called Maya. Voicemail. I sent a single text, Sarah, please tell me this is a mistake. 5 minutes later, a response came, but it wasn't from Sarah. It was a picture sent from Maya's phone. It was a selfie taken on the deck of the cruise ship. Sarah was standing there, holding a glass of champagne, looking happier than she had in years. Next to her was Marcus, his arm draped casually over her shoulders, wearing an expensive watch that looked remarkably like the one I had sold to fund this very trip. Maya stood in front of them, flashing a peace sign at the camera. Underneath the photo, Sarah typed, Marcus wanted to make things right with his daughter. He paid us back for his share of the ticket. Don't cause a scene, Frank. We will talk when we get back in 2 weeks. Let us have this family moment. A family moment. Paid his share. The words burned through my veins, melting away the shock and leaving behind a cold, crystalline clarity. Marcus hadn't paid for anything. I knew Sarah's financial patterns, and I knew Marcus had been unemployed for months. She had used our joint savings account, the emergency fund we had built together, to fund his presence on that ship. They were living large on my hard work, treating me like an inconvenient caretaker who could be dismissed the moment the real owner decided to return. I stood up, my hands no longer shaking. The warmth that had filled my chest for 12 years turned into ice. I walked down the hallway into my home office and logged into our bank accounts. My suspicions were confirmed. 2 days ago, Sarah had withdrawn $5,000 from our emergency reserve. But what she didn't realize was that the house we lived in, the beautiful, 3-bedroom craftsman-style home, was left to me entirely by my late grandfather. Her name was on the joint bank accounts, but the deed to the property and the primary investments were solely in mine. I called an old friend from college, a real estate attorney named David. My voice was calm, devoid of the frantic tears Sarah probably expected me to shed. David, I said, staring out the window at the pouring rain. I need to liquidate everything. The house, the car, everything. And I need it done before the cruise liner docks back in Florida. David tried to talk me down, asking if I was sure, if there was room for counseling. But I told him about the text, the photo, and the betrayal of a 16-year-old girl I had raised from the dirt. They want their real family, I whispered into the receiver. I am just giving them exactly what they asked for. Empty space. By noon that very day, the wheels of my quiet retaliation were turning. I signed the paperwork to put the house on the market at a slightly below market value for a quick cash sale to an investment firm David worked with. I contacted the utility companies, scheduling all services to be completely disconnected by the end of the week. I cleared out the remaining balance of my personal accounts and packed 3 suitcases with my clothes, my books, and my grandfather's old journals. As I walked through the rooms, pulling down curtains and packing away my things, I found a small clay handprint Maya had made in kindergarten. It had "Best Dad" written on it in faded glitter. My throat tightened, and for a fleeting second, the pain threatened to pull me under. But then I remembered the peace sign she gave the camera while standing next to the man who ignored her for a decade. I gently placed the clay handprint on the kitchen counter, right next to the house keys. I wasn't going to scream, I wasn't going to fight, and I wasn't going to beg for their love. If I was just a placeholder, then it was time for the placeholder to vanish. The true weight of a consequence isn't delivered with noise, it lands in total, absolute silence. Over the next 10 days, I lived out of a quiet motel room near the state line, watching the final pieces of my old life dissolve through digital paperwork. The investment firm finalized the cash purchase of the house within a week. I watched the funds transfer into my private account, a cold sequence of numbers replacing the walls that used to echo with my family's laughter. I didn't stop there. I closed our joint account, leaving exactly half of the remaining balance for Sarah, dignified, fair, but completely severed. I transferred myself to a small high school in a quiet town 3 hours north, packed my car, and left the city behind without a backward glance. When the cruise ship finally docked on Monday morning, I didn't send a text. I didn't need to. The reality of their choices was waiting for them the moment their tires hit the driveway of what used to be our home. Through our old neighbor, Marcus's sister, who ironically was the only one in their family with a sense of decency, I learned exactly what happened when they arrived. Sarah, Maya, and Marcus pulled up to the house in a taxi, sunburnt, laughing, and carrying bags of souvenirs bought with my stolen emergency fund. But as they walked up the porch, the laughter stopped. The manicured lawn was empty. The for sale sign was replaced with a bright red sold banner across it. When Sarah tried her key in the lock, it wouldn't turn. The locks had been changed by the new owners. Panicked, she tried to look through the windows, only to find the interior completely gutted and dark, no furniture, no curtains, no warmth. The electricity, water, and gas had been disconnected days ago. The home they thought they could return to after their little family moment was gone. It didn't take long for the public fallout to ripple through our social circles. Sarah immediately tried to paint herself as the victim, calling my friends, my colleagues at the school, and her own relatives, crying that I had abandoned her and her daughter out of petty jealousy. But truth has a way of outliving a lie. I had already sent a brief, dignified email to our mutual friends and family before leaving town, containing two things: a copy of the 6:45 a.m. text message she sent me, and the selfie of them celebrating on the cruise ship. The community's response was swift and devastating for her. My old colleagues, who knew how hard I worked to support Maya, stopped returning Sarah's calls. Her own aunt called her out publicly on social media, telling her that treating a good man like an ATM was a shame she would have to carry. Marcus, true to his nature, disappeared the moment the financial reality set in. When he realized there was no house to live in, no stable stepfather to foot the bills, and no money left to exploit, he packed his bags within 48 hours and abandoned Sarah and Maya all over again, leaving them to face the wreckage alone. Maya called me from a restricted number 3 days after they were forced to move into a cramped, one-bedroom apartment near the highway. Her voice didn't have the proud, distant tone from the cruise ship picture. She was sobbing, her voice trembling like the little 4-year-old girl I had rescued years ago. "Dad, please," she whispered through her tears. "We don't have anywhere to go. Mom is crying all day. Marcus left us. Please come back." My chest ached, a deep, heavy pain that reminded me of the 12 years of bedtime stories, packed lunches, and science projects. I took a deep breath, looking out at the unfamiliar trees of my new quiet town. "Maya," I said, my voice steady, calm, and laced with a sorrow that was final. "I was your dad when you needed a roof, when you needed medicine, and when you needed love. But you told me you wanted your real dad. You can't call me only when the storm hits, after throwing me out into the rain. I hope Marcus gives you the life you chose." Gently, without anger, I hung up the phone. Healing doesn't happen because the people who hurt you suddenly realize their mistakes. It happens when you finally stop letting their actions dictate your peace. It has been several months since that rainy Tuesday morning, and the quiet town I now call home has brought a strange, comforting stillness to my soul. I still teach history, looking out at a classroom full of young faces every day, teaching them about the rise and fall of empires, all while knowing intimately how quickly a personal world can crumble and rebuild itself. Sarah tried to take me to court for a piece of the house sale, but the premarital agreements and the clear proof of her financial misconduct with our joint savings cut that battle short. She and Maya are still living in that small apartment, learning the hard way that the stability they took for granted wasn't a given, it was a sacrifice I made for them every single day. I don't wish them harm, nor do I look back with bitterness. When you give your whole heart to people who treat it like a temporary convenience, the greatest act of self-respect isn't revenge, it is walking away with your dignity intact and leaving them to live with the exact choices they made. I am Frank, and for the first time in 12 years, I am building a life that belongs solely to me. My dear friends, thank you for sitting with me today and listening to this story on Revenge by Frank. Life has a strange way of testing our boundaries, of showing us exactly where we stand in the hearts of those we cherish most. It hurts to realize you were just a placeholder in a life you built with your own hands, but sometimes, the universe clears the room just so you can breathe again. I want to ask you honestly, if you had received that text message after 12 years of devotion, would you have done what I did? Would you have packed your bags and walked away in silence, or would you have stayed to fight for a family that had already chosen someone else? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please gently hit that subscribe button, share this video with someone who might need to hear it, and join our quiet community. Until next time, take care of your heart, protect your peace, and remember that your worth is never defined by someone else's inability to see it.